Good day or evening to everyone out there in the decoding world. My name is Logan, and this is Decode Your Reality. And today I'm going to be breaking down and decoding the pot of gold at the end of a rainbow. And what the significance to that is, of course, using the esoteric. And again, what does this pot of gold have to do with us esoterically? And then, of course, the rainbow as well, because that has great significance to all of this. So as I say, folks, the time you invest in this video will be well worth the time you invest in this video. And get comfortable, put a set of headphones on, get immersed in the music and the presentation. This is going to be a real fun ride. So here we go, getting into the breakdown of what we're going to be discussing in the zero position, the intro, which is what I'm doing now, and then the methods of my decoding. Number 1, aurum is gold. Number 2, the word rainbow. Number 3, the harvest. Number 4, the leprechaun. Number 5, the Ark of the Covenant. Number 6, 2 trees. Number 7, St. Patrick. Number 8, the source. And number 9, of course, what did you see during this presentation? I'd love to always hear your comments about what you saw during this presentation. So here we go, folks. The methods of my decoding. Now, folks, if you're new to this, welcome out. And it's just really like putting a puzzle together, and we're using multiple layers of the mystical arts. And of course, we use pi and numbers and numberempire.com. And these are just some of the methods that I use for my decoding, but I try to make it really crystal clear on how this works. If you look in the description below, if you're a returning subscriber, thank you so very much. If you want to fast forward past this and go right into the number 1 topic, skip the decoding methods, feel free to do so. But if you're new to this, you're going to want to go through this. It's really quick and easy. And we start off right here with the numerology. And this is primarily what I go with my methods of decoding. And that's really breaking down the spoken word into numbers, the science of numbers. Notice the word leprechaun is the number 39. And then we can bring in the second layer of that to start getting some symbols and a more definitive what that is linked to. Notice that we now go into what's called the cards of illumination, which, most people look at it as a typical poker deck. And these are greatly accurate when you start to break down our matrix reality in our world. Because you see, folks, these are embedded into nature. There are 52 cards in the deck of the cards of illumination, or a typical poker deck, or blackjack, or whatever you play. And that's linked to the 52 weeks of the year. And of course, there are 4 suits matching the 4 seasons in nature: spring, summer, fall, and winter. And of course, we know that there are ace through king per suit, and there are 13 cards in total matching the 13 weeks of each season. So these cards are highly accurate, and they're embedded into nature, and we can read them, tying them into numerology and other layers that we're going to get into. So the King Diamonds card is linked to the 77th card in the tarot deck, the King of Pentacles. Diamonds means pentacles, and this is the 77th card in the deck. And how I found that is through this layout right here. I made these graphics. If you want these graphics, just send me an email and I'll send them to you. My email is decodeyourreality@gmail.com. And notice that the last card in the tarot deck is the King of Pentacles. It's the 77th card in the deck. And that's tied to the King Diamonds card, which is the 39th card in the deck. And when you link these together, they start to tell a story. And we know that the King Diamonds is associated with the water suit. Diamonds means water, or our emotions. That's where Lucy in the Sky with Diamonds came from. It's the constellations above our heads. And the King of Pentacles is an offshoot because you see, folks, these tarot cards came after the cards of illumination. These came first, according to what history tells us, and these came second. And then we can bring a third layer or a fourth layer into this, and that is the elements of the periodic table, which, would be right here. The Royal Society of Chemistry, it's rsc.org/periodic-table. And, what do these have to do with the esoteric? Well, folks, we're made up of these elements. Not all of them, but we're made up a lot of these elements. And we can get a more definitive on just what these elements mean. And we start to click on them and get the photographs and the numbers and who discovered them and the year they were discovered. There's many, many ways to observe our matrix reality above and beyond just what the actual element means. But notice the 77th element is iridium. And of course, they make spark plugs, iridium spark plugs, and that's the spark of creation. And, iridium, when you go further, is the Greek goddess of the rainbow called Iris. That's where this name got its originations from. So as you can see, when you put all the pieces of the puzzle together, the leprechaun, starting off with the numerology of 39, is tied to the King Diamonds card, and that's tied to the 77th card in the tarot, the King of Pentacles, and the 77 is tied to iridium, the 77th element, and that's led to the Greek goddess of the rainbow, Iris. And, where do leprechauns hang out? What's the meaning of this presentation? The pot of gold tied to the rainbow. So, maybe your jaw's on the floor. Maybe this is like, wow, this is an aha moment for you. But you can clearly see how these are all in bed together and they're tied together. And they give us a story of how our matrix reality works. So getting into the first topic of conversation, it's the alchemology of the word aurum. Now, I don't know if you knew this or not, but the element gold is derived from the word aurum. It's a Latin origination. It has a Latin roots to it. That's why gold has the abbreviations AU. It's aurum. And what we want to do now is break down this word to give us more of a definitive of what it means. So we do what's called alchemology. And alchemology is something I discovered, and it's when you take numerology and then you break it down into the elements of the periodic table. So you'll get aurum is a 5-letter word, and it's 16264. And then what we want to do is we want to bring in the elements that match those numbers. 16264 is hydrogen, carbon, helium, carbon, beryllium. And then what we want to do is we want to add these up, and we want to get a total number output of that we can read from. So we go over to the trusty calculator, and we're going to add up those elements, and we're going to get the number 38.023 for aurum, linked to gold. And the 38 is the standout, and that's on the masculine side of the decimal. The decimal is the separation point of the feminine and the masculine. When you pump gas, the next time you pump gas, you'll notice that this side of the decimal feeds the left side. So we know this is feminine and this is masculine. And the masculine is kind of where it's at when it gives us more of the story, and that's the number 38. And then we go back to the cards of illumination. The 38th card in the deck is the Queen Diamonds card. The Queen Diamonds card, which of course, going back, going back to the methods, we had the King Diamonds card tied to Leprechaun. And we're going to get more into that, folks. We're going to get more into that. And, that's why we're starting off with gold, because we know that at the end of a rainbow, there's gold. We're told there's gold there. And what does the gold signify? What does it mean? And why is the leprechaun always lucky? And then tied to the light spectrum, the rainbow. And we're going to get more into that. But what I want you to notice is aurum. And we're going to get back to that Queen Diamonds card, I promise you. The word aurum is a 19 in numerology. The total of aurum is 19, and that's tied to the word battery. So what is this telling us? It's telling us that gold is a battery. And we know a battery is positive and negative. It holds a charge when charged, and it powers up something. And then, you bring in the tarot into this, and the 19th card in the tarot is the sun card. And the sun is a battery, folks. Make no mistake about it. That sun is a battery. So we can clearly see that gold is a battery. What is it giving energy to? Let's keep going with this. When we bring in the septenary, which I typically don't use, but I know a lot of you like to use the septenary. Notice it's the same output as the Chaldean, 19. Clearly showing you that the 19 is a strong pull for the element gold, which is at the end of a rainbow, and that's tied to the word battery. Gold is a battery. Why is it a battery? We're going to get into that. In the English, using the letters A through Z and the numbers 1 through 26, Aurum is a number 74, which is why I have this, picture here in the background, kind of indicating Jesus and Lucifer, those two characters, or the story of those two characters. They both equal the number 74 in the English ordinal cipher, matching that of Aurum, which is where gold got its name from. So the story keeps going that it seems that Jesus and Lucifer are tied to the gold. Why would that be? Let's keep going. Now in numerology, folks, and this is where gematria fails. So if you're using gematria, that's all good, but you're just connecting numbers, and there's a dead end to that because we know so many words can link to so many numbers. So in numerology, really, that's the science of numbers. That's really where it's the separation point, and you're going to get a much broader stroke of a meaning of what things mean. And in numerology, you can separate the consonants from the vowels, and it'll give you another layer to observe the decoding of. And you'll notice that, Aurum has two consonants only, the R and the M, which is 24. And then, of course, the vowels are 166, and that's tetragrammaton. We're going to get into that as well. We're going to get into the tetragrammaton. But I want you to focus on the 24, the RM, and that's linked to the 24th element in the periodic table called chromium. And chromium has its name derived from the Greek word chroma, and it means color. It means color. So here we have gold, or Aurum, and we break it apart. And remember, folks, back in the Phoenician times, Mesopotamia, and Hebrew, they never had vowels. They didn't use them. It was strictly consonants. So that it has some merit to it. It's important. And that's why, you want to do your name this way, your last name, your first name. You want to break the consonants apart from the vowels and get a different meaning. It gives you another layer to observe yourself from. So nonetheless, the chromium is linked to Aurum, which is gold. And we know gold sits at the end of a rainbow, which is tied to chromium, the rainbow. The rainbow. And that leads us into the rainbow. Notice the word rainbow, it has a numerology of the number 24. And that's linked to chromium, the 24th element, which is linked to chroma, meaning color. How about that? How about that, folks? And then when you bring in, the letter X, because the 24th letter in the English alphabet is the letter X. And then we get into our DNA and our chromosomes, the X chromosomes. X marks the spot. I mean, you're familiar with that. The X marks the spot. Has great significance to all this. The X chromosomes tied to chromium. And why is this important, folks? Because you see, we are humans. We're light beings. You can spell the word human H-U or H-U-E. Humans, and hue is the light spectrum. So that tells us clearly that we are light beings slowed down into physical matter, leading to our chromosomes, leading from the origination of the rainbow. When we look at it from the English ordinal, rainbow is the number 82. And that's tied to the element lead. And remember, folks, if you get into alchemy, if you really get into alchemy, the basic fundamentals of alchemy is turning lead into gold. Tied to the rainbow, tied to the human being, because we're light beings slowed down into physical matter called lead, which is, of course, is tied to Saturn, because Saturn is tied to lead alchemically, which is why I have chromium here. And you know what's really fascinating, folks, and this is where the elements of the periodic table have so much merit. It's not just the numbers and the protons and the words and abbreviations these elements have, but also you want to look at who discovered these elements. And this guy right here, Nicholas Louis Vauquelin, this guy discovered chromium in 1798. His name in numerology is an 82. How about that? This guy's name in numerology equals 82, and it's a match of the word rainbow in the English. It's a match to lead, and we're turning lead into gold, and the gold is found at the end of the rainbow, which is tied to chromium, and he discovered chromium. You see, folks, I believe that man is being used. We're being used like puppet on strings, like a marionette. You're being used. I'm being used. What do I mean by that? Well, just what I said. You're being used. You're living out your part. You're playing out your part. You really don't have a say in your life. You've already decided to come here. It's the only things that make sense is that you maybe decided to live out your life before you came here, and it was all planned out for you, and you're just living your part, living out your part. This guy was living out his part, and it's crystal clear. I've been showing this over and over. I have over 100 videos now showing and supporting that man is being used to fulfill out this agenda and this software that we're all a part of. And this is no exception. Absolutely no exception. And how about the dark side of the moon? You know, Pink Floyd, I know you have a lot of fans out there, Pink Floyd. I'm one of them. And, you know, this is clearly a huge integral part of esoteric and turning lead into gold. And, you know, notice that, you know, lead, which is where we start out at, turning into the light spectrum, chromium, we're light beings, and we're turning into lead. Notice, you know, lead is called plumbum. That's the original name of lead. That's why it has PB as its abbreviation. And then chromium is called chroma. And when you take the numerology of these two, you're going to get the number 55. Notice the subtleties. Plumbum is 33. Chroma is 22. Two master numbers, actually three when you add them up because you get the 55. Three master numbers with these two elements tied to the dark side of the moon. Because we have lead turning into the light spectrum. And that's tied to, you know, these two elements right here, titanium. Notice that titanium, the most abundant weight of titanium is 47.948, but the other atomic weight that it has, or isotope, is 51.946. 51 is a match of 51 for chromium. And chroma is 22. So you see how these are all embedded together, and it's crystal clear to me anyway. I don't know what you see, but it's crystal clear that, you know, turning lead into gold, and gold is found at the end of a rainbow, which is chroma. Do you see how this is beginning to tell its story of how really our life is all about, or what it's all about? Now we get into the cards of illumination a little bit more, folks. And I want you to stick with me on this. This This is something you may have been just observing for the first time. Maybe you've never seen it before, but just stick with me. This is a boilerplate chart for the cards of illumination, the standard display of the cards. Now there's two sides or two charts of the cards. There's what's called the Master Life and the Master Spirit. And some of your cards are stuck in here because they're tied to your birthday. And you'll notice I have the upside down cross here. Primarily when you read the cards, it's about the Master Life configuration. This is your ego. This is your spirit or your soul. And you can read from both. And why I'm showing this, folks, is because you see chromium, which is tied to the pot of gold at the end of the rainbow, and chromium is the rainbow itself, and it's tied to our chromosomes, because we're humans, we're light beings slowed down into physical matter called lead. That's tied to the Apostle Peter. Tied to the Pope, because the Pope is known as Peter, St. Peter. That's why they have St. Peter's Square in the Vatican City. And we know that the symbol of Peter is the upside down cross. Maybe you didn't know that. But you see, this is why this has multiple meanings, because, most people, they observe the upside down cross and it means devil or demonic or, the devil and all. It's linked to Peter, St. Peter, linked to the Vatican. And then when you make the shape of the upside down cross, you're going to get a bullseye in the very center of these two crosses, the 6 diamonds and the 3 spades. And these have great significance with this entire presentation. Because you see, folks, this is really where we're at when it comes to our incarnation. We are the hangman. We are upside down. We are in the upside down world. And if you saw my decode on Alice in Wonderland, you see Alice followed the rabbit down the hole to the upside down world. And that's what we're in. See, we're the fallen angels. That story, even though it may be a story, still has a lot of merit. Because we got to come from somewhere. Our originations have to come from somewhere, which is tied to St. Peter, which is tied to chromium, which is tied to the rainbow, and turning lead into gold from the pot of gold, from the rainbow, from the chroma key, tied to the bullseyes on these 2 upside down crosses, the 6 diamonds, the 3 spades. And when we get into that, folks, you see, we get into now St. Patrick's Day, which is where the pot of gold and the leprechaun and the luck of the Irish, all this come into play, because you see St. Patrick's Day, which is celebrated typically on the 17th of March, that day is the 6 diamonds card. And how I got that, I'm going to show you the boilerplate chart. Here it is. This is the Cards of Illumination birthday chart. Now, you're going to have some cards here associated with your birthday. Notice at the very top, running horizontally is the 12 months, and then the 31 days run vertically. And you can find your birthday card in here, and you should know what your card is. But you'll go to the March 17th card, and you'll see it's the 6 diamonds card. March 17th. And that's tied to St. Patrick's Day. And that's why I showed these upside down crosses, because there on the Master Spirit side is the 6 diamonds. In the bullseye position of the upside down cross, where the heart would be, is the 6 diamonds card. And then on the Master Life, it's the 3 spades card. And we're going to get into that. But the 6 diamonds card in the Cards of Illumination is the 32nd card in the deck. And we go back to this chart right here, and here it is. The 6 diamonds is the 32nd card in the deck. So this has a great tie-in to the St. Patrick's Day. Tied to the leprechaun, tied to the pot of gold, tied to our DNA and chromosomes and the light spectrum. The 6 diamonds. And it's the 32nd card in the deck. And that has great significance, folks, because it's tied to the fallen angels. Now listen, whether or not you want to believe in that story, because I wasn't there when this story was written, you weren't there, we have to completely go on the words of the church that delivered the Holy Taurian Bible. I say Taurian because it's linked to Taurus, because that's linked to Venus, and that's linked to the reproductive organs. And since we have two of those, it's linked to the Old and New Testament because there's two testaments in the Bible. That's why Bible, it's Taurus, the bull. But I want you to focus on the story of the fallen angels. In the Torah, the Old Testament, they're called the Nephilim or the Nephilim. And in numerology, the Nephilim end up becoming the number 32, matching the 32nd card, which is the 6 diamonds card, matching that of St. Patrick's Day because the March 17th day is the 6 diamonds card. And, you know, the word Capricorn is also a 32, and we know Capricorn is the 10th zodiac sign. 10th is linked to the Yod because the 10th letter in the Hebrew alphabet is the Yod. The 10th letter in the English alphabet is the letter J, which you haven't seen. If you haven't seen my video on the fish hook, you should check it out on Wish You Were Here. Pink Floyd has everything to do with that as well. But nonetheless, the word Capricorn is 32 tied to the Nephilim. That's 32. What is this telling us? Clearly, it's telling us that the goat, the sea goat, because we're in the sea of space, Capricorn means earth. The Nephilim are from the earth. And what do they have to do with St. Patrick's Day? Well, we're going to get into that. Well, St. Patrick's Day, again, is about the pot of gold at the end of the rainbow. So what do the Nephilim have to do with the pot of gold? We're going to get into that. Again, folks, remember, we're talking about turning lead into gold. Lead into gold. And then when we take, March 17th, folks, March 17th can also be written as 317. And 317 through numberempire.com is the 66th prime number. How many books of the Bible are there? 66. What is the 66th book? Revelation. And if you know what that whole entire book is all about, well, that's another key to your kingdom. I'm not going to get into all that today, but there's some kind of merit to that story anyway. And then we get into the St. Patrick's Day origination because it originated in the country of Ireland. The luck of the Irish. Ireland is a 3-syllable word. I've been showing this for years now, how you can break words up into syllables, how they roll off your tongue. Ireland, it's a 3-syllable word. And the reason why I spread it apart is you'll notice there is the 317 in there. I mean, it starts with I, as in the I am that I am, Ireland, but there it is. And again, as fate would have it, because there's no such thing as coincidence, folks. We're not trying to fit a square peg in a round hole. This is obviously crystal clear. The connections. The 317, and there is the 317 backwards. There it is. And this is the origination of St. Patrick's Day, is in the country of Ireland. Now, March 17th, here, you want to get interesting? Here we go, folks. March 17th is the 76th day of the year. Now, in leap years, it's the 77th day of the year. And, the word Nephilim, the original spelling of that in the Hebrew, which is where it came from, is a 76, using the Hebrew numerology cipher. It's a 76. How about that? And it's the 76th day of the year. March 17th. And I go back to here, and there it is. Tied to the 6 diamonds, tied to the 32, tied to the Nephilim. So, again, what is it you see? But I think it's crystal clear what this is showing. I think it's crystal clear. If you take those 2 days, 76 and 77, leap years, they come every 4 years. 4 is tied to the heart chakra, that's green. But if you take the 76 and you add it to the 77, you're going to get the number 153. And then you bring theology back into this, and then go back and study my Wish You Were Here decode video. I talk about Matthew 4:19, where Jesus is the fisher of men. And how many fish did he catch? Or Peter, of course, the story's about Peter. Peter is the one that threw the net over the boat. Peter's tied to chromium, the upside down cross. How many fish did Peter catch? 153. So clearly, folks, we're starting to get a more broad stroke of the story here, which is, this is a great rendition. This is from the album cover, Judas Priest, Sad Wings of Destiny, their album. And this is clearly showing a fallen angel. So is it far-fetched to believe that we're all fallen angels and our redemption is to rise back up through ascension? And our salvation will be through the heart chakra. And our salvation will be turning ourselves into alchemical gold. Getting rid of the physical body, which is lead, and going to gold. Is that too far-fetched? Now, when you bring in the cards from the tarot, tied to the March 17th date, being both 76 and 77, notice it's both the Queen of Pentacles and the King of Pentacles. And folks, if you haven't seen my decode on Random Thoughts number 6, I think it is, with the blood types, our blood types, the 8 blood types, are tied to this card right here, the Queen of Pentacles. So I already know, and this is, again, these are just my opinions and truths. This is what I am leaning towards, and this is subject to change. But it seems to me that we are an offspring of these angels that came down. And our blood is clearly tied to them. I mean, if you want to know who your father and mother is, physically, it would be tied to the watchmen, the fallen angels. It's not only talked about in the Taurian Bible, but it's also talked about in the book of Enoch. It's talked about in the Upanishads. It's talked about in the Quran. It's talked about in all the major theological books, esoteric books out there. Not just one, but multiple. So we're beginning to see that these books are, even though they're allegories, they're telling us kind of what really happened. And I mean, I don't even celebrate St. Patrick's Day. I don't know about you, I just don't, but I mean, clearly I never thought of it being linked to the fallen angels and this story, again, of what's going on in our matrix reality. But Queen of Pentacles, King of Pentacles are tied to the Washington, D.C. latitude, longitude. I've shown that many times. And, then you get into this here and the tarot. And again, the tarot comes and tells its story through its symbology. And then you get into numbers and the measurement of pi. You see, folks, the reason why I love pi, I mean, my last name is Payette, which is why I use pi. And I know it's part of my destiny. And I know it has extreme merit because there's only one way to measure pi, the perfect measurement of a circle. There's not multiple numerology ciphers or cards or anything like that. There's only one way to measure the circle, and that is through the infinite number in the string of pi. And I want you to notice that in the string of pi, the number 20, it appears at the 76th decimal digit of pi. How about that? So now we have St. Patrick's Day, talking about the luck of the Irish, talking about the leprechaun, and we're going to get into the leprechaun, talking about the rainbow leading to a pot of gold. I mean, it's really all about the pot of gold. And we know alchemy is all about turning lead into gold. That's what alchemy is all about, if you're an alchemist. But you see, when you bring in all these other layers, you get a broader story. And it's clear to me, I mean, the 20 appears at the 76th decimal digit. These two numbers are tied together. And then the 20th card in the tarot is the Judgment card. And it's a double X tied to the chromosomes. The Judgment card. I mean, it's crystal clear what the judgment is. I mean, we're being judged. Look at the symbology on here. You know, Revelation talks about the angel blowing the trumpet. That's what all this means. Theology is directly derived and tied to tarot. Tarot's tied to the theology. Make no mistake about it, they're all tied together. They're all components of one machine. But I mean, folks, the fallen angels being judged, I mean, that's clearly what this story is telling us. The story is telling us that we are part of these fallen ones. We're the descendants of that. And we're going to be judged. You know, keep in mind the subtleties I didn't even point out. March 17th, 317, that's the numbers jumbled up. That's 137. What's 137? The 33rd prime number. 33 steps, 33 vertebrae. We get christened through that, going up through the skull and Golgotha, where we get crucified. I mean, go study Santo Spinachi's work. He clearly tells you what's going on. It's tied to the 137, tied to the 33. And now it's tied to St. Patrick's Day, tied to gold, tied to lead, tied to judgment. To me, it's crystal clear. Now, the story is beginning to really unfold and present itself to all of us. The story, anyway. Because again, we know this matrix was written long before we got here. Whether the story's true or not, it's clearly true in the matrix because it's expressing itself. Crystal clear, it's expressing itself. You're not even having to think about it at this point. So, you know, that gold, to me, is energetic food. And that's why I'm asking this here, you know, what is harvesting our energy? And that's a 91. And that's tied to the word battery. And you know, you can't get any more opposite on the number spectrum than the 9 and the 1. I mean, besides the 0, which all numbers come from, the two numbers that are opposite of one another are the 1 and the 9, and that's the positive and negative, the anode and the cathode, which is why battery equals 91. That's why I know this has massive merit. In the Chaldean, it's 19. It's the mirror of the 91. Same thing. So, you know, it's clear to me that we're being used for energetic food. We're being harvested for our energy. Because we're batteries. Check out my Christ battery decode. And if you want to get into the English, if you don't like the Chaldean, let's ask the English. What's harvesting our energy? That's a 331. 331 is the 67th prime number. This is really, really a big deal right here because 67 is tied to holmium, which is the most magnetic element, and we're going to get into that in a minute. But when you go a little bit further through the string of pi, the number 67, it occupies the 98th and the 99th decimal digits. It's a compound number. So 67 is 98 and 99. And when you add those up, you're going to get the number 197. And that's tied to the element gold because you see gold, even though it only has this weight right here, 196, it has other isotopes. And it's tied to the 197. And we're talking about harvesting our energy. What is our energy? It's gold. It's gold, folks. I mean, that's why I said man's being used. We're being used for energetic food. To what level, I don't know. I can't define that. But I've shown it enough over and over in many different presentations besides this one that man's being used and we're being harvested for energetic food. The Greeks called it ambrosia, which is tied to the GD. I showed that in a graphic that I presented. So, get into the number 67. The 331 is tied to 67. The 67 is the 19th prime number. And folks, that's tied to the word battery. Which again, I go back up here. What's harvesting our energy? Battery. And I said battery's 19 in the Chaldean. 67, 19th prime number. You see, that's why Christmas, Santa Claus, that's why he's ho, ho, ho. Because it's homium, homium, homium. I mean, homium's abbreviation is ho. You think that's a coincidence? You see, but man's being used because man's not, whoever created Santa Claus, they didn't actually sit down and figure out that, I don't believe anyway, that man is smart enough to sit down with all these prime numbers and tied to the numbers and numerology, and they're sitting down with all these centuries ago and said, we got to make a guy named Santa Claus, and he's going to say ho, 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 because it's got to be tied to 3 holmiums because it's the 19th prime number, and that's linked to the word battery. No freaking way. That's why I'm saying man's being used, because there's no possible way man could be doing this consciously. Man's not smart enough to do that. I don't take anything away from people being smart, but not at this level. Way too complicated for man to be doing this. Especially, with this Santa Claus or Kris Kringle guy. I think there's a very good possibility that we're being used for energetic food through the archons. And it's possible. It is very possible that the archons are using all these modalities in the story that I'm showing you with the fallen angels and the Jesus character and the Lucifer character. They're using that to harvest your energy because it's a battery. You're a battery. I'm a battery. And our emotions feed the anode and cathode, the positive and negative. And the archons, of course, are linked to the Gnostic demiurge Yaldabaoth. And if you notice, you can spell out the word archon. There's not a lot of words that you can spell out through the elements of the periodic table. Not big ones anyway. Not what I've found to spell it out this way. And you'll notice, archon has holmium in it. I mean, this one right here is tied directly to Jesus. Jesus equals 18 in numerology. And the Christ equals 39 in alchemology. And, we're made up of carbon. And you have the most magnetic element on the periodic table, holmium, tied to the story of the fallen angels. And when you take these 4 elements and you add up their protons, 18 plus 6 plus 67 plus 7, going over to the trusty calculator, you're going to get the number 98. And that's found at the number 67 in the string of pi. So I know this has extremely strong merit to it. I know it has some significance to this whole story that we're showing here today. I know it does. Because you're not going to find this with a lot of things like this, the way it's expressing itself. So it has a lot of merit. So now we get into, we're talking about what's harvesting our energy. I mean, let's look at the word harvest. And the word harvest is a number 26. And when you do the alchemology of harvest, it being a 7-letter word, here are the 7 alchemical elements. And going over to the trusty calculator, look at the outcome that you get, 55.057, and that is tied to the element iron. Now, folks, if you didn't know this already, in your blood, the reason why it's red is because of iron. Iron makes it red. If you get anemia, you have a shortage of iron in your blood. And what's fascinating about this here, folks, is you see this right here is called the Yod-Heh-Vah-Heh, the ancient Israelite God of the Bible, which I've been showing this with the fallen angels and Nephilim, but clearly it's tied to the archons. You can't leave this section out. So are they one and the same? That's something that I have to leave up to you as the observer. I can't make that distinguishment for you. But remember, if you study the Yod-Heh-Vah-Heh, this character, which, if you study some of the other texts and stories, and there's so much stuff, some of these texts say that this is a logos, a sub-logos. It's not the actual creator God, like the true one. It created humans, but it's not the creator of all things. It's a demiurge, is what the Gnostics call it, which is, they call it Yaldabaoth. But 26 is the numerology of the Yod-Heh-Vah-Heh, and that's a match of the protons in iron. And the word harvest is 26. So you can see 26 harvest, the alchemology of that is 55. That's a direct match to the protons and the atomic weight of iron, which is a match of the ancient Israelite God of the Holy Bible. And remember, this deity, this entity, did not come on the scene, according to history, until the Bronze and Iron Age. Before that, it was non-existent. It wasn't around. It was something else. I mean, it's traced to the Phoenician alphabet, which is all about the L, electricity. It's where the Elohim came from. So all these stories, they just get passed on. It's like passing the baton on. And it takes on another form. But I thought it was interesting that harvest, we're being harvested for our energy. Is this the character taking the harvest, collecting the harvest during the harvest time? Let's look at it through the English. Now, harvest is a 93 in its total numerology, and that's a link to the planet Saturn. Now, if you study a lot of the esoteric, you probably already know that Saturn is directly tied to the Yod-Heh-Vah-Heh, Chronos, Father Time, which is why the Old Testament, the Torah, they're all about the Yod-Heh-Vah-Heh, but they're all about the worship of Saturn, which is why these link like that. Now, when you do the alchemology of harvest through the English using the trusty calculator, you're going to get the number 194.849. And then when you go into the string of pi, you're going to find that it appears to the 390th decimal digit of pi, 390, 391, 392, but the 390 is where it starts. And these are the two elements that make up the 39, because you're going to get the 390, you have the 0 there, that's infinite potential, but the 39 is the big standout, linked to the word harvest, linked to Saturn. And the reason why I have a picture of the sun and moon in the background is because you see, this is the sun and the moon, the Ark of the Covenant. Argon and potassium is the moon and the sun, the Ark. And then when you bring in the other layers, you have radium and yttrium, because these are linked to the 39 and the 88 as well. These are all in bed together right here, telling us a more definitive story. And then you're getting into the god Ra in the Egyptian times, which is supposedly a 6th density god, a solar deity. Perhaps this is where our originations came from, is radium. Is that what the story's telling us? I mean, the Christ is tied to that. Flux capacitor, time travel. Then it gets into radium, Ra, the Egyptian deity, derived from the Ark of the Covenant, derived from the harvest. We're being harvested for our energetic food. And then you get into the leprechaun. Let's get into the leprechaun. Because without this leprechaun, we're just left with the pot of gold. I mean, the leprechaun is all about the Irish, the luck of the Irish. That's where the leprechaun's roots came from. From everything that I've studied, it's the color green. And of course, the heart chakra is the color green. Notice leprechaun is the number 43. And when you do the alchemology of leprechaun, I mean, notice it's a 10-letter word, folks. The number 10 is tied to the yod. 55 is the 10 Fibonacci number. And we know 55 is iron. So what is it with the leprechaun? Why the leprechaun at the pot of gold? At the end of the rainbow, which is us. Well, when you do the alchemology of leprechaun using the trusty calculator, you're going to get the number 91.074. Folks, the 91's the big standout. That's, once again, battery. So it's clear the leprechaun is a battery. We are batteries. We are the leprechaun at the pot of gold. Part of the leprechaun. And then when you bring the string of pi into this, folks, you see the 43, it appears as the 23rd and 24th decimal digit of pi. 23 is crown, 23 is blood, 23 is history. All those words equal 23. Think about that. Blood, crown, history, leprechaun, gold, led into gold, blood, led into gold. 23 and 24, which is what 43 occupies, is the word tetragrammaton, because 23 plus 24 is 47. What is the tetragrammaton? It's the ancient Israelite God of the Taurian Bible, the Old and New Testament. Tetragrammaton, tied to the leprechaun, tied to the gold. Is this what's really using us for energetic food? Is it grabbing our gold? No, leprechaun in the English is a 103. Keep in mind, if you do A through Z through the Chaldean, that equals the number 103. But notice that 103 is the 27th prime number. 27 is cobalt. Cobalt is chaos and order. When you pull up the symbol of cobalt, here it is, it's a goblin. It means goblin. And there are the two dragons on each side and the pine cone or the pineal gland at the very, very top, showing enlightenment. This is right off the Royal Society of Chemistry. And that's what it means. It means goblin. Leprechaun means goblin. Goblin. And of course it's tied to the dragon. Dragon's tied to Michael. That whole story. That whole story. So then we bring in the septenary. And I wanted to bring this in because it had a lot of merit during this presentation and the decode I was doing on this. Notice that the word Jesus in the septenary is 27. And remember, cobalt has dragons here, and it means goblin. And Jesus is the nemesis of the dragon. Michael and the dragon, tied to cobalt. And Jesus is tied to that. Tied to the leprechaun. Remember, folks, you see, Jesus is Jupiter. Jupiter is Zeus. Zeus is the fourth chakra. The fourth chakra is green. It's the color green. Leprechaun in the septenary is 37. 37 is the 12th prime number. 37 is rubidium, and we're going to get into that in a minute. 12 is magnesium. So the 37 and 12 are in bed together. 12 is magnesium. Notice the 23, that's linked to the word crown and blood and history. And I show that right here, linked to leprechaun through the string of pi. But what I have here is the 2 fish, because that's Pisces. And the reason why I'm showing that is because Pisces is the 12th sign. 12 means completion. 12 hours on a clock, 12 hours of light, 12 hours of darkness. That's why there's only 12 hours on a clock. And that gets tied to the Christ, folks. You see, Jesus came on the scene through the Piscean age. That's why the Catholic Church had the fish hats. And leprechaun's 37, rubidium is 37, and that's the 84. And you'll notice that the 84 in the string of pi appears at the 18th decimal digit. That's tied to the word Jesus. So they're all in bed together, folks. All these things are linked together. There's no separation point. That's why Jesus was a fisher of men, because it's Pisces. And he's tied to the leprechaun. The luck of the Irish. And then when you get into gold again, and the 197, you'll see, the 37, which is tied to rubidium, which is tied to the Christ, which is tied to leprechaun, which is tied to the 12 and Pisces and the fish, and Jesus was a fisher of men. 37 in the string of pi, it's tied to the 197. And 197 is gold, folks. You see, gold has one stable isotope. It's called 79, and it's 197. 196.967. What is the leprechaun sitting on? Gold. And that brings me to the Ark of the Covenant. You see, folks, I showed the Ark of the Covenant through the archons, which is where the Ark of the Covenant could come from. And there is the ecliptic, where the sun and moon move on. And that's the Ark. This is the Ark right here. The Ark over us. The sun and the moon, they move in an arc-like fashion. And notice that the sun and moon in the tarot are the 18th and 19th cards in the deck. And when you add 18 and 19, you're going to get the number 37. And when you go to the Royal Society of Chemistry and you look at rubidium, it's the electric eye. It's called the electric eye. Well, what is the moon and the sun? I'd say they're electric eyes watching over us. Perhaps stargates, perhaps using us for energetic food. And then when you go into the string of pi and you go with this rubidium here, rubidium, of course, the most abundant weight it has is 84. 84 appears at the 18th decimal digit again. I showed this. That's Jesus. Jesus is tied right into this element, rubidium, and he's tied to the Ark of the Covenant, which again, 37 right there, leprechaun. Tied to Jesus, tied to the fish, tied to the leprechaun. Jesus, or Zeus, is green, runs the heart chakra. And that's, the sun and moon, that equals the number 37. It's a 55 if you want to reduce it down, but that equals the number 37. When you look at the tarot, again, 18 and 19 is 37. 37 through the string of pi, folks, is the number 46 and 47. It occupies both, but it starts at the 46th position, and that's Jesus Lucifer. See, folks, that's what I believe we all have. We have both the good and bad inside of us, the yin yang, the dark and the light. And you can't have one without the other. Not in this reality. And since it makes up the 46 and 47, then we get into the two trees. And I've shown this many, many times, and I can't leave it out because you see, in theology, the original spelling in the Torah, where it came from, the tree of life is 46, the tree of knowledge is 47, which is palladium and silver. And the tree of life is Jesus Lucifer, and the tree of knowledge is the tetragrammaton. And of course, we're told to stay away from this. But folks, they're one and the same. That's our DNA. The two trees are our DNA. And when you bring all three of these elements together, you're going to get the number 93. What's 93? That is Saturn. Saturn. Is Saturn running both the tree of life and the tree of knowledge? Is Saturn running the archons? Is Saturn running the Bible? Is Saturn running the Upanishads and the Quran and the Tibetan Book of the Dead and all these ancient esoteric books? Is that what it's running? When you go a little bit further, folks, you want to look at it through the English. It's 93 in the Chaldean. Look what it is in the English, folks. It's pi itself. So I believe, here's your Trinity right here. Here's your Trinity. Clearly it's pi. Clearly it's Saturn. That's your Trinity, folks. And if we're being harvested for our gold, who's taking our gold? Where does that story go? Does it go to Saturn? Does it go there? Clearly something to think about. We're almost finished with this presentation. This has been a long one, folks. Notice that St. Patrick's Day, which is where all this came from, the pot of gold and the rainbow and the leprechaun and it's a 37 tied to rubidium, tied to the heart chakra, because it's tied to the Christ character, which is Zeus, tied to the leprechaun because the leprechaun wears green, which is tied to our heart chakra. And that 37, there it is. And we go back, and there it is. Look at the 37, sun, moon, Ark of the Covenant, Jesus, Lucifer, the sun and moon cards, rubidium, the Christ, through the string of pi, the Ark of the Covenant, being harvested for gold through that rubidium, the leprechaun's 37. I mean, how many more layers do you need to see before you can start to really distinguish what's really going on in our matrix reality? The story of it anyway. And how a simple little holiday called St. Patrick's Day is tied to theology, it's tied to numerology, it's tied to pi, it's tied to the elements of the periodic table, it's tied to astrology. It's tied to them all. And you can clearly see it. St. Patrick's Day in the English is a 166. That's tied to the tetragrammaton. So the tetragrammaton, that's the box. It's the ancient Israelite god of the Bible. It's Saturn. Is Saturn harvesting our gold? Is that what's going on? I mean, listen, the Christ figure said, no one gets to the Father except through me. Who's the Father? Folks, there's so many people that put their faith in this character right here when he's not even the boss. He's not even the boss. He's a middleman. If you want to get down to brass tacks, this dude is a middleman. And people are putting all their salvation and energy, and they're just giving their life over to this character when he clearly says he's not even the Father. And they don't even think about this kind of stuff. If you want to go into that story. So I'm almost finished with this, folks. Let's finish up with, how about Christmas? Well, I got into Santa Claus a little bit and the ho-ho-ho and the holmium. Tied to the 67, tied to the 19, tied to battery, tied to gold. Christmas is a 26. That's iron, folks. That's our blood. And of course, this is all about the Christ birthday, December 25th. I mean, look what source energy is. Source is 26. Source energy. Energy is Saturn. Saturn's 21. Tetragrammaton's 47. Tied to source energy. Tied to the Yod-Heh-Vah. Who's running Christmas? The Yod-Heh-Vah. Clearly the Yod-Heh-Vah is running Christmas, which is running Santa Claus. Who's taking all the energy off of the worship of Christmas? The Yod-Heh-Vah is. Clearly. It's crystal clear who's absorbing all that energy. It goes beyond, far beyond opening up presents and putting up a tree and the lights and all that. It goes way esoteric. That's who's harvesting the energy of Christmas. Is that character right there? Who's harvesting that energy? You know, I mean, even source energy, which is a very loose word, by the way. Words can be dangerous. They can be swords. So we can be very manipulative or manipulated through words. Because you can just put any word together or words together and get an outcome. So you got to take this with a grain of salt. Notice source energy is a 155. That's pi. Because, 155 in the string of pi is found at the 314th decimal digit. But notice source through the English is 81. 81 is linked to the 67, which is tied to Holmium, which is tied to Santa Claus. Ho, ho, ho. So as you can see, folks, St. Patrick's Day and the leprechaun and the pot of gold, it's tied to Christmas. It's tied to Kris Kringle. I mean, let's finish up with this one. I think it's my second to last slide. I mean, you go 67 numbers past the 3 point in pi, you're going to get the number 300. You add up all these digits, 67 digits past the 3 point, which is tied to Holmium, the most magnetic element, which is tied to Christmas and the battery and St. Patrick's Day, and we're being used for energetic food and the leprechaun and lead to gold. You add it up, it becomes 330. There's that 33 with infinite potential behind it. And it just leads me to this last slide right here, is that we're being used for food. That's what I believe, folks. To what level, I don't know. But look at, humans are being used for food. 109, that's tied to the 29th prime number, tied to the Gnostic demiurge, which is tied to Saturn and the Yod-Heh-Vah and the Jesus and the Lucifer. All these things and the archons, they're all tied together. All of them are in bed together. And look at the 109 in the string of pi is found at the 206th decimal digit of pi. That's lead. Turning lead into gold? Where's our gold going, folks? Who's getting our gold? Our energetic gold. When you leave this place and you pass on from the physical, who's getting your gold? Who are you giving your gold to? You get into the story of the Anunnaki. We're being mined for gold. How can you leave that story out? How can you just dismiss that story? I wasn't there when it was written, but how can you dismiss that story when that story has everything to do with this story? They're all in bed together. They're all tied together. So is it too far-fetched to believe that the leprechaun represents the heart chakra, which represents our gold, our salvation, and is that energetic food where we're going to go after this lifetime? So many questions, folks. You're probably scratching your head right now. I still am. Still, we're getting closer and closer to the truth of what this really means. And we started with a pot of gold. We started with the luck of the Irish, Ireland, and the fallen angels. Is that story true? Are we really descendants of these fallen angels? And our salvation is to go to gold, to turn into gold, away from the lead, and go on to the next level of graduation. Is that what it means? Or is it really we're being used for food and we're a battery? I showed this in the Christ battery that we are batteries. Human beings are batteries. And we're all part of this construct. And there's no way to prove anything other than what we're showing here as opinions. But I believe that we're being used for food, energetic food, like the Greeks said, ambrosia. Makes sense to me. To me, it does. But just what happens beyond this level of living, I don't know. But the numbers, I can see if we're just using numerology, but we're using pi and prime numbers and alchemy and numerology and the tarot and the cards of illumination and the medicine cards. All these layers are pointing to the same thing, folks. It's just going to be up to you to make the decision on what you want to believe. And what you want to believe. So, folks, what is it that you saw during this presentation? I went over a lot of information, a really long presentation. I'm at over an hour and 10 minutes long on this one. I appreciate each and every one of you watching, but what is it that you saw? And, what does this mean to you? Beyond St. Patrick's Day, celebrated on March 17th. Remember, the 17th card is the star card. I didn't even get into that in the tarot. The star card is the 17th. We're all stars born. Are we the fallen angels? Are we stars that have fallen, turned into physical matter, and, we end up becoming this leprechaun? And we got to find our pot of gold. So many ways to observe this, folks. But what is it that you saw during this presentation? So that's all I got for today. My name is Logan. This is Decode Your Reality. I appreciate every single one of you watching.